In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to model a sports trophy in Blender. But before I begin this video, a huge shout out to the YouTuber Mina Ahmad Habeb, as his extensive collection of speed modeling videos specifically on football trophies greatly assisted in creating this tutorial. The link to his channel is in the description.
3, 2, 1.
Open up a new Blender project and click A and then X to delete the default cube, light, and camera. Then go to the -Y view or the Y view, and then click Shift and A and select a reference image. Import an image of the trophy you want to create. In my case, I'm using a vector graphic image of the Champions League trophy that I found on Google. Move the reference image to the center of the screen by clicking G and then Z. Next, press Shift and A and select a new circle mesh. Activate the X-ray toggle by clicking this button or by clicking Alt and Z. This allows you to see your model mesh in front of your reference image. Select the mesh and enter edit mode by pressing Tab, and then select these vertices and then scale the vertices to align with the bottom of our reference image by clicking S. From this point, extrude the vertices on the Z axis to this point here by clicking E and then Z. Select the top vertices and scale them down by clicking S. And now to create the curve at the top of this section, add in a loop cut by clicking Command and R with the top vertices selected. Ensure it's aligned with the X axis, and then drag up these new vertices that have been created and scale them as needed. Repeat this process to complete the curve. Continue by extruding the top vertices on the Z axis by clicking E and Z and adding in scaled loop cuts for the section above it. For the next section, again, extrude on the Z axis and add loop cuts as necessary. You can add in more loop cuts to a certain section by using the mouse scroll wheel after clicking Command and R, and then just scale these vertices to the lines of the vector graphic. In a section like here where there is a larger radius but there is no curve, select the top vertices and duplicate them by clicking E, then press S and Shift to move these points slightly whilst maintaining horizontal alignment. And then just extrude these new points on the Z axis and then add in the appropriate amount of loop cuts. Repeat this technique for the section above it. Now for this section of the trophy, where the radius is actually smaller than the section we've just created, you simply repeat this step, but instead of scaling out these new vertices, you scale them in, and then extrude once again on the Z axis, and add in the appropriate amount of loop cuts to match the shape of the vector graphic. Repeat these steps until you've completely recreated the outline of our trophy shape. Then in object mode, right-click the mesh and select Shade Auto Smooth.
You guys, this trophy here. There you go. Get it down below.
Select your mesh and in edit mode, add in a loop cut aligned with the center of the starting point of the arms on our vector image. Then go to the X view and click on these two vertices here. Then click Shift and D to duplicate them, and then hit P and choose Separate by Selection when this window appears. This will create a new mesh using these two vertices. Now what you want to do is trace the trophy's arms outline in our vector by selecting these two vertices in edit mode and extrude along the X-axis by clicking E and X, which will give you horizontal extrusion, and then click E and Z for vertical extrusion. You can also drag a set of vertices and move them into position by dragging your cursor while still in edit mode and clicking G with the X-ray toggle turned on so both sets of vertices are still connected. Apply a solidify modifier to add some thickness to the mesh, and you can increase the curvature between the points you've created by using Ctrl and B to add some bevels to your mesh. You can adjust the amount of vertices created using the bevel tool by using the mouse scroll wheel. And for more control over the mesh curves, you can create some loop cuts and then move these vertices to align with the trophy arm in our reference image. Add a mirror modifier on the Y-axis and use our trophy Mars mesh as our mirror object. You can reduce the gap on our mesh using the mirror modifier by increasing the merge amount and apply both of the solidify modifier and our mirror modifier. From here, insert a loop cut at the bottom of the arm, and then extrude these vertices left and right on the Y-axis. Apply a subdivision surface modifier, and select and move down these vertices by clicking G and Z, then select these two vertices on either side and scale them closer to the center of the arm by clicking S. And finally, grab these two faces and drag them on the X-axis by clicking G and X and move them closer towards the trophy vase mesh. And then in object mode, right-click the mesh and select Shade Smooth. Add in a loop cut along the entire length of the trophy hand, one to the left and one to the right. Select the new vertices on either side as well as the vertices on the outer edge of the trophy arm. Deselect any vertices on the inner edge and these vertices at the bottom of the trophy arm. Scale these vertices on the Z-axis by clicking S and Z and holding down the Shift key. Then select the edge in the centre of the trophy arm and deselecting these bottom vertices. Scale these as well on the Z-axis, with these vertices being scaled slightly lower than the outer vertices. Then select these inner faces at the top of the trophy arm and click Alt and E and select Extrude Faces on normals when this window appears. Extrude these vertices in slightly to create a slight eye dent at the top of the trophy arm. Then add in a Solidify modifier to the mesh with a thickness of 0.017 meters and an offset of 0. Select the top vertices which intersect with the trophy vase and slightly scale these up. Then move these vertices along the X-axis and then slightly rotate them by clicking the R key. Then add in a loop cut and drag it towards the top vertices to flatten the top of the trophy arm. Then drag these bottom vertices on the X-axis so it intersects with the trophy vase and slightly rotate them. Then add in a mirror modifier to the trophy arm and set it on the X-axis. And then apply a Solidify modifier to our vase mesh to increase the thickness on the inside, concealing where the arms interact with our vase mesh. And then finally add a Subdivision Surface modifier to the trophy vase for a smoother appearance.
And this is where I put a trophy. If I had one! Sorry, what's the...
To add the UEFA logo to the trophy, obtain an SVG render of the logo. This can be achieved in Adobe Illustrator by applying the Image Trace effect, eliminating any unnecessary vector components and exporting as an SVG file. Import the SVG file into your Blender project, select all the curve layers, scale them up for better visibility, and rotate them 90 degrees on the X-axis by typing R, X, and 90. In the -Y view, reposition the curves to align with our reference image, adjusting their scale accordingly. With the curve layers selected, right-click and choose Convert to Mesh, and then right-click again and select Join to create one single mesh. Rotate the logo slightly on the X-axis to align it with the trophy vase mesh and move it closer towards the trophy. Add a Shrink Wrap modifier, selecting the trophy vase as a target, and ensure Target Normal Project is enabled as the wrap method, and choose Above Surface for the Stat mode. Switch to Edit mode and navigate to the Face tab and select Beautify Faces. Now introduce a Solidify modifier to the logo, with an offset of 0 and a thickness of 0.006 meters. Following that, include a Subdivision Surface modifier, then in Object mode, right-click the mesh and set it to Shade Auto Smooth. For the text, still in Object mode, press Shift and A and choose Text. Then, while in Edit mode, input the first line of text for the trophy, and ensure the text is centered in the text settings. Import your chosen text font file, such as Free Sans Bold, and capitalize the text copy. In Object mode, rotate, scale, and position the text to match the reference image. Duplicate the text layer and move it down on the Z-axis to create a second line of text on the trophy. Apply a Solidify modifier to both text layers to increase their thickness, and convert both the text layers into separate meshes. Introduce a Remesh modifier to both meshes, and navigate to the Sharpen tab and set the Octree path number to either 7 or 8. Uncheck the Remove Disconnected option and apply this modifier to both meshes. Add in a Decimate modifier to both layers, click on the Planar tab, and then apply that modifier to each layer. In Edit mode with the trophy mesh selected, insert a loop cut aligned with the center of the top text layer if necessary. Select this loop cut, click P, and choose Separate by Selection to create a new mesh. Remove the modifiers on this new mesh, and then convert it into a curve. Select the top text and add the curve modifier, choosing the newly created curve object. Select the curve mesh in Object mode, right-click, and select Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. Navigate to the transform settings on the top line text and reposition it using the location settings. Adjust its rotation to slightly better match the curve of the trophy vase, and repeat these steps for the bottom text copy. Then, when these meshes are in the correct position, go to Object mode and right-click Shade Smooth, and make sure the Auto Smooth option is enabled for the normals in the mesh settings. Begin by adding in a new curve and edit it to match the shape and position of the curve displayed on screen, and remember to press E to introduce new points to the curve. Now, convert the curve into a mesh and extrude its vertices on the x-axis. Apply a solidify modifier to the mesh and enhance the top of the mesh by adding a bevel for improved curvature. Reposition the mesh vertices as needed and introduce a subdivision surface modifier. And then in object mode, right-click the mesh and select Shade Smooth. From here, add in a mirror modifier on the x-axis, duplicate this mesh and relocate it to create a second set of ribbons, and add in 2 loop cuts at the bottom of the mesh to decrease the curve of the shape at the bottom of the mesh. Apply all modifiers to the ribbon meshes, except for the mirror modifier, which can be hidden for now, but apply all of the modifiers as well to the trophy text, the trophy arms, and the main trophy mesh. Then select all these trophy parts, and right-click and select Join to convert them all into one single mesh. In object mode, add in a new armature by pressing Shift and A, and then place it to the top of the ribbon. Switch to edit mode and extrude a new set of bones from the bottom of the top master bone, following the ribbon mesh's path. Include another bone at the end, extruding it upwards on the Z-axis. Repeat this again for the other side of the ribbon. Make sure all the bones are aligned to the center of the ribbon mesh. Then, in pose mode, select one of the end bones, followed by the next bone by clicking Shift, then click Command+C and select Damp Track when this window appears. Repeat this step for all the other bones on that side of the armature. Then, whilst having one bone selected, go to the Bone Constraints tab and set the influence to 0.5. Repeat this for the rest of the bones. Then when we move the armature in pose mode, here you can see that the bones move in a smoother motion reacting to the bones attached to it. Once that side of the armature is completed, do the same steps for the other side of the armature. From here, go into object mode, select that ribbon mesh, and then click Shift and select the armature for that ribbon. Right-click and go to the Parent tab and click with Automatic Weights. Now when you go into pose mode, the mesh ribbon will move with the armature. But to save yourself some time, you can duplicate that armature and amend it in edit mode to fit the shape of your other ribbons and apply this new armature to your other ribbon meshes, just like we did with the first one. You can also now turn back on the mirror modifier to have the ribbon mesh appear on the other side of the trophy. But for the best results, I would say make sure all the ribbons have their own mesh with its own bespoke armature for full control. Now, because my model will remain static, I only need to control the armature of the ribbons for my scene. However, if you want to have the ribbons react to the movement of your trophy model, I'd recommend checking out this tutorial by Nita Ravali, which goes through step by step how to achieve this effect. The link is in the description. In object mode, introduce a large cube mesh, scale it up, and position it below the trophy to serve as a stand. To transform the cube into a stand, apply a horizontal loop cut across it, then adjust the vertices to your liking. Select these upper vertices and slightly scale them in. Subsequently, add in a bevel whilst these top vertices remain selected. Then in object mode, right-click the mesh and select Shade Auto Smooth. Now with the stand in place, we can begin animating the ribbons to simulate a gentle breeze, without having to do any simulations. Select one of the ribbon armatures and switch to pose mode. Choose any specific bone and press I to insert keyframes for rotation and location at the beginning of your timeline. Advance along the timeline and make slight adjustments to the bone's position by pressing R, and then add in another keyframe by clicking I. Proceed further along the timeline, rotating the bone in the opposite direction, and continue repeating this process. Keep in mind that, due to the mirror modifier, the ribbon on the opposite side will also move accordingly. Once you're satisfied with your armature's animation, repeat these steps for another bone on the back of the ribbon armature, inserting rotation keyframes along the timeline. Make sure that the inserted keyframes do not cause the ribbon to intersect with the trophy stand or the trophy itself. Once the animation is complete, repeat these steps for the other ribbons, ensuring that they do not intersect with the other meshes. Next, add in a camera by pressing Shift A and then select Camera and position it at the desired starting point of your render. With the camera selected, go to the View tab and enable these two checkboxes to allow your camera to move with your cursor in the viewport. Then, with the camera selected, enable this Record button and then move the camera along to create the keyframes across the timeline. And then make sure to turn off the Record button when you finish moving your camera. And also uncheck those two checkboxes when you're happy with your camera's position on the keyframes in your timeline. To establish a background, add a plane beneath the trophy stand and scale it accordingly. In edit mode, extrude the rear vertices along the Z-axis and then apply a bevel with Ctrl B. Subsequently, extrude these vertices towards the camera, select the original vertices, press X and choose Dissolve Vertices. And lastly, drag up these two vertices on the Z axis. Make sure the background fills out the entirety of your camera view in the viewport. Now it's time to add lights to the scene, which in the case for this render, I just used a simple 3-light setup. Click Shift A to add in a light, and then use the rotation and grab tools to move them into position. I placed one light above the trophy, and then added in another 2 lights with one to the left and one to the right of the trophy mesh. I'd recommend viewing your scene in the render view, and feel free to experiment with the settings until you get your desired look. Once satisfied with the lighting and animation setup, proceed to apply materials to your meshes. For the chrome on the trophy, consider following this tutorial by 5 Minutes Blender, and you can use standard shaders for the remaining materials. Render everything out as an image sequence and import it into your preferred compositor. In my case, I use Adobe After Effects. Do some slight color grading, and then render it out as a video file to complete your project. And that's the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked it, make sure to click that like button and please consider subscribing. And if you want to watch some more football related Blender tutorials, then check out this video on screen right now on how to create your own 3D footballer in a Toon Shader style. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.